And today, besides John, we have the special guest teacher, Jennifer Headley. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Jennifer. And thank you for coming, Scott from Buffalo. Kevin, thank you for coming back. In Course in Miracles, Jesus asks us, what do you treasure? How much do you treasure it? So in order to treasure this afternoon miracle gathering, give me a few minutes for that preparation. So close your eyes. So if you are new to Course in Miracles and started the workbook lesson on January 1st for the first time, you already noticed that this February is a truly, truly revolutionary period for your life, because for the first time, you notice, you recognize your new identity. So through the January, we trained our mind to observe our mind without running away by having thought, making up a new thought, new judgment, and so on. And February, we finally start touching our new identity, our holiness, and blessed ourselves. So please sense your holiness, silence in your mind. Holiness abides in silence, and the voice of God is in silence. So silence can be felt as the image of small, beautiful flame of candle in your mind, or beautiful lake in your chest. So you can use your imagination, visualize such images. And choose your willingness to listen to the holiness. Listen to the voice in that silence. Can you hear the voice? I'm here. I'm here. I'm telling you, you are truly holy. You are blessed by God. So listen to John and Jennifer and all our other friends with this voice this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon. Just a few announcements before we get into our material. We publish a magazine called Miracles, so if you're watching this on YouTube, go to our website, which is miraclesmagazine.org, and send us your information. We'll send you a free copy of the magazine. We need your street address. Unless you want just to get the digital copy, you can just get the digital copy as well. But either way, take a look at, we've been publishing this with Jubilee for 35 years and still at it. We're thinking about making some modifications and changes. You'll see what that's going to happen by May, June, we hope. We'll see. Also, I have a class on Tuesday evenings based on the teachings of A Course in Miracles. If you're interested in maybe joining in on that, again, go to the website, read up about it. I tend to do this in 6-week segments. Sometimes it's 4 weeks. It just depends upon the topic. We're just going to be completing a 6-week series this week, which is called, it's based on Chapter 21, Section 2 from the Course. It's called Responsibility for Sight. And we're spending 6 weeks on 3 sentences. The 3 sentences are, first of all, I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. Today we're just doing, I choose the feelings I experience. I was going to try to do 2 and 3 today, 1 in the first hour and 2 in the second hour. And then I wound up with almost 40 slides on number 1. So I thought, no, that's just a big enough topic. We're just going to take today for number 1. And then we'll take what the goals in March and we'll slowly go on. The last 2 can be put together. I'm really happy to have Jennifer Headley with us today. Jennifer has been teaching the course for quite a while herself. She's ordained in 2006 from the Agape out in California. She's a therapist. We've done a few things together in the past 2 years. And I know I've watched her teach, and she's a teacher of teachers, especially for those who are interested in developing therapy practices for themselves. I'm going to let her come up and talk to you after I take about 20 minutes or so first. Then Jennifer will come up and just reflect on what I've shared. We'll then have 10 minutes of just dialoguing, and then we'll take our first break. So, shall we dive into this? This is the sentence. I'm responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. Decide upon the goal I would achieve. Notice it's goal, not goals. Talk about that later. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for. That's an amazing sentence. When you think about, the Course also says the script is written, that in some way or another we ask for this. I like the way Søren Kierkegaard, who you may know was a Danish theologian from the 19th century, said that life can only be lived forward, but can only be understood backwards. And when you go back and you start thinking about it, you go, yes, that had to happen. Oh, yes, well, that event had to happen. And that event had to happen. It's all a part of the learning, because this is a school, or if you prefer, a reformatory. Or at least a mental hospital. All right. So this is Ken Wapnick. Of course, Ken was a very, very dear friend and my teacher all the way through. I've mentioned before that I was introduced to the Course in Ken's apartment 5 blocks from where we are right now in April of '75. And he was the spokesman for the Course. This is a course on accepting responsibility for what we think, what we feel. Today we're doing what we feel and who we are. So the Course is this, we all know this from the introduction to the Course, but let's take a look at it. The Course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It's beyond what we can be taught, but it's something that we can be known, right? It does, however, aim at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So what we're doing, we're emphasizing removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. I got an email. Some of you may have, on Sunday mornings, I've started sending out this thing called Sunday with Monday, just like 500 words. Today, someone sent me, a new student, a question asking about why is the course so negative, you know? And so I answered that new student saying, well, it's not really negative. We're talking about looking at what's negative, because if we don't look at what's negative, we can't remove, that's a block, right? We can't remove the block unless we recognize that the block is there. This is one of the basic things, really, that Sigmund Freud and the other early psychologists like Jung and others discovered. And that is how much repressed, buried material there is inside all of us that we haven't even looked at or we didn't even recognize was there. They suddenly say, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. You mean you don't understand why you're not behaving right, why you're acting out? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason for it if you want to look a little deeper. So that became, we call psychoanalysis, where they would dig in to try to find out what's going on. That doesn't necessarily heal things, by the way. But it's helpful to look at it, because if you don't look at it, you can't change anything, right? So this is Ken again. Says, this is not a course in creating the positive. It is a course in removing the negative. Right? Because once the negative is removed, then the positive just comes to, it's already there. It just comes to the fore. But if we can't come to the fore, if it's being buried, so that we can't see it, if it's hidden, right? I mean, one of the things that I think, for example, that's true, we all love each other, and it gets kind of buried underneath. Take a couple that are in a relationship, and there may be some fighting and stuff going on the top, on the surface, some hurt feelings and anger and stuff, but you kind of want to get to the point where you can say, look, let's stop this. Because, you know, underneath it all, we really do we love each other here. So let's get to that. And let's forget about all this disagreement on whatever this stuff is, that how the house is, or who left the dirty dishes in the sink, or how you're driving the car, or any of that nonsense. That's just nonsense, right? So the course is not about adding anything, it's about subtracting, removing the blocks. So the course says, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. So we had a session on this several months ago, and that was talking about cleaning house. It's first we got to kind of clean house, our psychic house, in order to be able to see more clearly, right? Subtracting the false, the truth automatically comes to the fore. Now the Course says, you have but two emotions. One, and I put in brackets what it is fear. You made, and one, love, which was given to you. In other words, love that's innate. It's already there. You think of the love an animal has for its babies, for its newborn young, right? It's just there. It's automatic. It's not even something that has to be thought about. It's just spontaneously there. But then as we get older, then we start getting into more individuality, more differences of opinion, different ways of seeing things. Then we can begin to argue, to point out the differences. In fact, one of the things the ego does, the ego relishes in finding differences and pointing out the differences. And one of the ways we've seen that amplified a lot lately, and I don't want to go into this other than just to say what I'm about to say, politics. Okay, so I said it. Now, I mean, it's constantly an argument, right? There's a constant argument going on, which really prevents business from getting done. In a lot of ways that business should be getting done. We should be able to find a way to communicate here and to cooperate with each other so we can do what we're here to do, rather than just pointing out quirks and personalities and differences of ways of seeing, right? So each is a way of seeing, a point of view, and different worlds arise from different sights. See through the vision that is given you, for through Christ's vision he beholds himself. Now, that's a very interesting line. see through the vision that is given you. So remember up above was given you. It's already there. This is given you. You already have the love. We can't take that away, but we can distort it terribly, right? It's always there. That's a part of heaven. Heaven is a place of love. You really are coming from heaven, so you can't lose what your inheritance is. We're just recognizing what the inheritance is. But then we get this split that comes into consciousness that tells us that there's an outside, first of all, and what's outside is different from what I am. And not only that, but now I see problems in what's on the outside, right? And I can point out those problems, as I said a moment ago. So we just have these, there's only two emotions, or only two feelings in the broadest sense. The broadest sense is either love or it's fear. Now, love and fear can have all kinds of different ways in which they are manifest. Love can be adoration and devotion, appreciation, joy, gentleness, laughter, play. All those things would fit into what we would call a loving atmosphere. And then we got fear. And under fear, we've got things like worry and anxiety and angst and apprehension and uneasiness and dread and terror and panic and sorrow and all that's all the negatives, right? All right? So, I'm going to have to go to this. So, if you cannot hear the voice for God, it's because you do not choose to listen. That's where the Course is it's because you're not listening. And we're not listening because we've allowed this staticky other voice to dominate over the top of the love that's underneath. Right? That's getting in the way. That becomes our constant distraction. That you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitude, your feelings, and your behavior, yet this is what you want. This is what you're fighting to keep and what you're vigilant to save. This is the ego now that's doing this. These are the things it wants to keep, the things it wants to save, the things it's not going to let go of, like opinions and attitude. Right? So your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of the ego. And you do not seek the face of Christ. That's the face that's under there. Remember who Jesus is in terms of the definition we've had? We've looked at it 2 or 3 times here already. Anybody can say what it is? I'll say it. In the manual to teachers, Jesus is a man was a man who saw the face of Christ in all of his brothers and sisters and remembered God. It's a beautiful definition. We're talking about the historical Jesus now. There's a man who saw the face of you, who saw only love. Who saw only love, and by seeing only love was coming back his way. He gives it and he receives it. He's giving and receiving only love. There's nothing else. There could be no negativity. There would be no judgment on Jesus' part. All right? There are a few passages in the Gospels that sound very judgmental. I think that those are not genuine passages. I think somebody else got a hold of the Bible at that point. It had plenty of time for that to happen. Right? So where do feelings like being upset or disappointed or offended or disgusted come from? Right? As I like to say, there's only one way to be upset. You got to have a setup. Right? So you set it up. You set up the scene, and then there's something about the scene that you just don't quite like. You know, it's just, there's something about the way he looks. It just doesn't sit well with me, or the way he's dressed, or whatever it is that's going on. And there's only one way in the world to be disappointed. And that is, of course, that you have to have an appointment. So if you have an appointment, you can be disappointed, but then, hey, you're the one who made the appointment. In other words, you have some expectation. You have some anticipation. It's supposed to look this way. It doesn't look this way. It doesn't look the way you would like for it to look. So now you're disappointed in whatever, right? Okay. Disgusted, that's the same thing. It's a very judgmental word, isn't it? Disgusted. You know, why would anything be disgusting? Right? As I've sometimes said, our baby's diaper is disgusting. I once said that at another meeting. Some woman on the back row said, yes. It is what it is, you know. And to the mother that's changing the diapers, it's just what it is. It doesn't have to mean, or the father who's changing the diapers. Oh, by the way, just to let you know, I became a grandfather for the 3rd time this week. All right. Actually, just on Friday, our daughter Sarah gave birth to Garrett. We have 3 under the age of 4. Wow. I know. Busy. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, it just was delightful to hold Garrett for a while. He was born on, was it Thursday morning or Friday morning? Friday morning. All right. Back to this. So such thoughts can only come from an ego. Thoughts of being disappointed, offended, upset, disgusted, The whole point of the Course in Miracles is, it's interesting to use the phrase, the whole point of the Course is, the whole point of the Course in Miracles is, you're not an ego. You are not an ego. In fact, it's not only you're not an ego, there's no such thing as an ego. And that gets us around to the point of looking at an illusion. This is really kind of the hard part of the Course. I mean, the hard part to recognize that it's an illusion, that it actually has no existence at all, despite the fact that we all know that we live within that framework most all of the time. So what we're really looking at, we're kind of struggling to get free of that framework. And it takes a lot to do it. I mean, it takes, in fact, is the big point, which we did talk about a little bit a couple of months ago, is you actually have to get to a point of an ego death. I mean, the letting go, which is not a death in the sense of, it's not something we kill. You can't kill an ego. Well, we can let it go. Killing it would just try to make it stronger in that sense. You're a child of God, and that's all that really matters. This is Mahatma Gandhi, of course, saying fear vanishes only with the annihilation of the ego. And again, I want to, if I could, I correct Gandhi. Can I correct Gandhi? The word annihilation. The word annihilation sounds a bit like destruction, right? It's not about destructing. It's not about, it's just about it. It's like once you begin to realize that all there is love, the other stuff just disappears. It just melts away. There's nothing violent. I once heard a popular speaker say, we should kill the ego. No, that is definitely an act of violence to kill something. It's not about killing anything. It's just about realizing it's a dream. And when you realize it's a dream, what you want to do is awaken from the dream. So you're not carrying this dream around anymore. Okay? Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which the ego thinking is capable. So this is an interesting phrase. It's the only time the Course kind of gives a little positive push to the ego. Belief there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea, which the ego is thinking. This is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self. And you know, that's under there for all of us, isn't it? By that I mean, there is this sense that it's not supposed to be this way. I mean, that we're not supposed to have all this fighting and stuff, all this bickering and arguing that's been going on in politics, for example. That is so obsessive of us as a people to get caught up in that kind of stuff, rather than getting around to, as I said, doing the practical stuff. Going on. So there's a difference between feelings and emotions. Basic difference is that feeling is something which is more conscious, By that I mean you could actually say, I feel happy because, or I feel sad because. We could give it a kind of definition. We could explain why it is. Identify the source. An emotion is more internal, subjective, or unconscious. In a sense, it might be not quite so clear to us why we have a particular emotional response to something. You might ever find yourself just crying and not knowing kind of what the why the, or it could be joyful too. It could be another kind of response. Why is it, for example, that we fall in love? I mean, it's really something. It's an interesting term we use, falling. You kind of tumble into this. And why does it happen with some people but not with other people? We're talking about being in love, but I'm talking about romantic love at this particular juncture. That there's just something that's kind of opens the door, and all of a sudden we find ourselves tumbling into this experience, and it's not clear always why that it is, but nevertheless, that seems to be what's happening. Okay. So this is from A Course of Love now, not A Course in Miracles. It says, you learn in A Course in Miracles that all knowledge is generalizable. So is all feeling. All feeling results from love or lack of love. That's the same thing as love and fear, right? There are no other reasons. For the feeling that you experience, all feelings are generated by the heart. And to have heart and having nothing to do with the body, all offerings are love or lack of love. It's the same thing as the same, but it's fun to read it in another source as well. And by heart here, she doesn't mean a part of the body. I mean the author of it. Right? Okay. So now I want to concentrate much of our time today on two feelings, or two emotions, however you want to look at it. One is guilt, and the other is going to be fear. So we'll start off talking about guilt. The Course talks about what it calls the attraction of guilt and the attraction of God. So we got these there, and it literally describes them as being kind of like magnetic pulls. By that, I mean there's something that the mystic pull is always toward God. St. Francis is a mystic. It was all his life. He was just being pulled. Well, no, if you know the early story, he had to have an experience, just like we all maybe have to have an experience. It begins, but that pull is there. There's something that you want to know more. You look around and you say, there's got to be more than just earning a living, having kids, going to work, the diurnal process that we all go through every day. There's got to be more than the diurnal process, like waking up, having breakfast, going to work, coming home, watching TV, drinking a beer, going to bed. In the same way, there's got to be more. There's a very strong attraction, rather, toward guilt. But guilt pulls us down and pulls us in. And guilt is separation. And we feel the separation when it's happening. And guilt, and it happens to us when we're selfish, and we know that we're being selfish. This feels like a selfish thing that I'm doing right now. A very good example that a lot of folks can identify is anything that's overdone, like overeating, makes us feel, oh, you feel guilty when you overeat, right? Or if you drink too much and you feel guilty about that, or whatever it is that's kind of pulling, or being angry is then we feel guilty about the fact that we let ourselves get angry, or we let ourselves get upset, or whatever it is that pulls us down, and then we get trapped in the guilt. It's especially true when you hurt someone. When you hurt, that's an awful feeling. It's an awful feeling to think, oh my God, I hurt this person. Right? I don't mind telling you, I got married at the age of 22, separated and divorced at the age of 23 and 24. And the reason for doing it, first of all, I was very lonely. I was in an all-male practical seminary at the time. And, well, anyhow, no need to go into it. There was my high school, my college sweetheart back there. And Why weren't people said, what when you going to do it? When you what did that? And so next thing I know, I ask her on the phone from California, and I had this awful feeling the moment after I'd done it. I was, what did you just do? Oh my God! Call her back right away. Oh, maybe it'll work. You know, obviously, you know, and then she was a very nice person, still is, I suppose. We haven't been in contact. But a year into the marriage, it was like, kids? I'm not ready for kids. You know, it was like, I want to see the world. I want to go to France, which is what I did. Et cetera, except the guilt. The guilt was so bad. The guilt was just so heavy. I hurt this person. I hurt her family. I hurt my family. And it just was really unpleasant. So why do we go there? Why had I chosen to have that experience? So I could tell you about it now. All these many years later, that was 1965. Right. So this is Ken talking about guilt now. It says guilt is the psychological experience of the belief in sin. So we have to talk about sin, guilt, and fear. These are the big three that we're going to be spending some time on this afternoon. So guilt is the psychological experience of the belief in sin and can be defined as the totality of all our negative thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about ourselves. The one I just described was a personal thing. So, going into guilt. When you feel guilty, remember that the ego has indeed violated the laws of God, but you have not. Now, you have not means that the you that you really are, the you that you are in truth has not. The Son of God that you, anybody know what the lesson for today is? What's the lesson for today? Somebody say it out loud. What?
I am blessed as the Son of God.
I am blessed as the Son of God. If you started the lessons on 1, today you've been, by the way, every 10 minutes you're supposed to think that today. So if I see you, every 10 minutes? Really? Oh my goodness. Just don't forget it. That's the whole point. I'll try to remind you every 10 minutes. But it's not the you that the ego. Okay.
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 Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I respond to the fact that I hear I'm blessed as a son of God. Why not a child of God? Why a son of God?
Well, it is child, honey, and in fact, is on the
Or
thing that I
maybe son
sent.
and child are the same.
Well, I
Think
sent
about
around
that,
an email this
guys.
morning based on this lesson, and I said that the lesson for today was child of God. Okay?
Not
Helen
son.
Schuckman was writing this in 1960s, different kind of atmosphere at the time. That was the primary thing, right? Okay, let's go to our quote. When you feel guilty, remember that the ego has indeed violated the laws of God. You have not. The you really are cannot sin. That's why the whole ego thing is an illusion. Within the context of the illusion, it seems very, very real. That's why the way that we're going to overcome this, we'll get to it another time, not maybe this afternoon, is that forgiveness of yourself is the only way to get free of this, but that forgiveness can only come from a higher state, only because from when you realize who you really are in truth, can the forgiveness occur. Leave the sins of the ego to me. That is what atonement is for. So me here means Jesus, or me here means the Holy Spirit, right? Leave the sins of the ego to me. Let me handle this. Let me take care of this, right? I remember once I was really upset with a brother. This is many, many, many years ago. And I prayed about it. And I needed an answer. And the answer that I got, very rarely you get an answer, but I mean a very clear kind of words. And it's usually just a phrase or a sentence or something. And the answer was, let me handle this? Oh, that's pretty good. You handle it. I don't know how to, I certainly can't fix it. Let's go on. So sin is the belief in the reality of our separation from God. This is the origin of everything. This is the tiny mad idea. The tiny mad idea is that it's possible to be separated from God. It is not possible. But just for a moment, you, me, we, humanity, mankind, entertain this thought. And entertaining this thought then gave us the sense of this individual. We have to break away to do it. We broke away. We thought a thought outside of the mind of God. Right? The result is the feeling of guilt. Guilt is the feeling we experience in relationship to sin, because now I'm thinking, well, I did this, and now this, it's the feeling that pervades because of the sin that was in the past. Now I feel guilty in the present. Fear is then the emotion of the ego originating in our expectation of punishment for our sins. So now the fear is, I did something against God. God's going to get me. It's going to come around again, and I'm going to get hit because of this awful thing that I did. Whatever this, there's going to be a price that has to be paid. And in karmic terms, there's some truth in that, but not in God's terms. Because God, first of all, doesn't, you remain forever a blessed child. What's the lesson for today again? I am blessed as a child of God, right? And that's all that God sees. He only sees your blessedness. There's nothing else that can be seen, because everything else is an illusion. It's like, it literally is a dream, or it's like a movie. A movie is something you saw. It wasn't a real thing, and these events never occurred, right? But that would be what it would be like. Let's go on. So it is essential that error not be confused with sin. Error can be corrected and the wrong made right, but sin is irreversible. So the Course is really asking to say, this is one of the major differences between the Course and a lot of traditional Christianity, because in traditional Christianity, a sin is a sin. And we may say it can be forgiven, but I actually had somebody tell me once regarding a particular issue. She says, well, I can forgive it, but I can't forget it. Oh, okay, well, then you haven't forgiven it, have you? I mean, if you're still hanging on to it, I understood what he meant, but he was going to pass it over or something, but he's still holding on. He couldn't really let it go. I can't forget it. It did happen, God doesn't even see this. There is no problem in the first place. It's a mistake. Mistakes can be corrected. Errors can be fixed. So we need to see that for ourselves. For ourselves, one of the things that happens, of course, whenever we make a mistake is that now hopefully we learn from our mistakes. So by learning from our mistakes, we learn not to repeat the mistake. We're not going to, well, I don't have to do that one again, hopefully. But then, of course, there's those things that get repeated, like you think that you've overcome an addiction and then you regress. So you've got to do it again. You've got to overcome, you've got to do it again and again until it becomes fixed, so that you really know that you're just not going to go back there and do that again. We're going to hold questions till, okay? All right. So as I said, remember this world is a school. So the ego's use of guilt. Irrational thought is disordered thought. God himself orders your thought. Now this is a very important point, which is a subtle point in the Course, because your thought was created by him. The only thought that you have, which is a, quote, real thought, are the thoughts that you share in alignment with the mind of God. Does that make sense? Because it's true. The only way you can think is to think in alignment with the mind of God. Jesus was really someone who simply realized that and was able to start thinking all thoughts in alignment with the mind of God. So there was no thought that would have been outside. I and the Father are one. That's from Jesus, right? So if what I say, this is Jesus in the New Testament, what I say is not I who say it. It is the Father who speaks through me. It's this Father who says what I am saying. That was blasphemy in Judaism and of the time. And the consequence is the cross, right? Because you just can't walk around. That's like saying I am God. And that wasn't only true in Judaism. There's been other instances. There was a Sufi mystic who also got hung on a cross for saying the same thing. But if you get deep enough into this, you will get it. I mean, you will see it. If you're deep enough into the Satori, into the experience, you will recognize there is no, in fact, there is no separation. You cannot but be one with God. So the foundation that David Fishman and I work with is called the One Mind Foundation, in recognition of the fact that there is just one mind. And what we're trying to do is to bring that memory so much back into the mind that that becomes the mind that we hold with consistency rather than just from time to time through meditation or as a result of doing the Course or a loving act or whatever may be happening with us. So guilt feelings are always a sign that you do not know this. So anytime we're in guilt, we're saying, I do not recognize it, because these thoughts are not coming from God. So now we're in the fantasy land. And so much of our thinking is fantasy land thinking. This is not reality. This is not the real world. And we know that. I mean, I think that we know that we're spending, if you're having unpleasant thoughts about somebody else, if you're projecting, even in your mind, not saying anything, this is dreaming. You're dreaming this dream of the world. It's a nightmare, actually, because you believe that you're really separated from them. Right? That's why it's really good to, like with politics again, to witness what is happening dispassionately, and just, it's a play. It's a drama. It's a soap opera that's being on a world stage, and I can watch this and say, okay, or I can get plugged into it, and I can have all kinds of opinions, one side or another side. It's helpful not to have opinions, right? They also show you believe you can think apart from God and want to. This is such an important, this goes back to the beginning of the Course and to the origin of the separation. You believe you can think apart from God and want to. That's the break. That's Adam and Eve. That's eating the apple. That's going back and chewing on the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the problem is that now means we have a split mind. So they got a split mind. It's the split mind that's the problem. So it would be nice to do a chart. Up here we've got God, we've got truth, we've got reality, we've got love, we've got eternity. I'm going to say something about what eternity is in a minute. And then down here we've got the illusion, we've got But within the illusion, there's also like sky. Let's have a sky up here, and let's have water down here. And we're swimming under the water, and it's like the light is penetrating it, the water. God's thoughts are penetrating. You know, it's there, but there's also this other stuff going on. And it doesn't have the same kind of clarity that we have up here when it's just light. Does that make sense, right? That's where we are all the time. But we've got this other possibility where these two mixed, our minds are mixed. And we know the truth. Sometimes we really feel like when you're when you're being loving, it feels wonderful to be loving. Yeah? It feels wonderful to be giving love. I mean, it's almost nothing that's nicer than giving the love away, right? Sharing that, because that's the way. Who was Jesus? A man who saw the face of Christ and all of his brothers and sisters. And remember, it's the sharing that automatically makes it rich to us. But there's like the two worlds. Let's keep in mind again, the ego is that which wishes to be independent, on my own, king of the hill, top of the heap, a number one. Frank Sinatra, or whoever is the king of New York, I don't know. So, just now, I'll do a few more minutes and we're going to get Jennifer to come up. Every disordered thought is attended by guilt at its inception and maintained by guilt in its continuance. Guilt is inescapable by those who believe they order their own thoughts and must therefore obey their dictates. Now, what did the slide before say? It's that our thoughts are ordered by God. That may seem like an incredible thing. There's a resistance there on that, because the resistance is that if I turn my mind over to God, then God wins. Right? And on the ego level, I lose. The truth of the matter is, if God wins, you win. Because this is who you are. But now that looks a little bit like arrogance. You know, that's why, again, what Jesus said was arrogant to the scribes and the Pharisees of the time. But it wasn't arrogant at all in the sense of being the truth. But you can understand why others who would be jealous of somebody else saying that, it couldn't be true. Or if it is true, then wow. So while you feel guilty, your ego is in command, because only the ego can experience guilt. This need not be. Sometimes this need not be as a section in chapter 4 in the course. Sometimes it might be fun just to do that section. It's a really, really, really beautiful section to read, chapter 4, this need not be. Because it describes so much, and then it'll get to the ends of the paragraph, and then italics, this need not be. This situation need not be. You don't have to be living in this guilt and this fear. This need not be, but you've got to see it in order to correct it. All right? So you may believe that you're responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. The truth is you're responsible for what you think. This gets us back to our general theme of responsibility here. Because only at this level can you exercise choice. What you do comes from what you think. You cannot separate yourself from the truth by giving autonomy to behavior. It is controlled by me automatically. This is Jesus speaking again. Whenever we see the me, right? As soon as you place what you think under my guidance. So it's all about choosing. It's all about choosing who's going to rule this mind And what am I going to choose to see?